Today, I'm going to be talking to you about knowledge diffusion, improving decisions through pattern analytics. So the topic of patterns may not be as familiar to each and every one of you in the room. I'll be careful in explaining of the data that we're looking at here today and giving you an intro into the very exciting world of pattern and pattern analytics. In an area of technological competition and technological dependencies, highlighted also by the recent global pandemic and the disruption of global supply chains, competition is ever increasing, and understanding knowledge diffusion and knowledge sharing becomes key to gaining and ensuring competitive advantages. How can we understand knowledge sharing and knowledge diffusion? How can we take control of it? For that, we will turn to the world of patents today. My name is Marco Richter. I'm leading the Global Customer Success Organization at LexisNexis IP. And together with the world's largest innovators, me and my team, day in and day out, harness the power of patents to make better decisions to drive innovation forward. Why are we turning to patents? Organizations around the globe are spending about $2.5 trillion a year into research and development. The ultimate outcome out of research and development is a patent. A patent grants you exclusivity and is a major incentive for pouring additional money into research and development to answer yet new challenges and seize new opportunities. So patent grants you exclusivity. It's a territorial right. That means you can exercise this right in the countries that you apply this patent for, but only in the countries that you apply it for. It doesn't quite stop there. Patents are the only source of technological information to over 80% of humankind's technology. No manuals, no handbooks, no conference proceedings, no scientific papers, no university lectures hold as much technological information as patents hold, and as is exclusively available only in and through patents. Now, patents are a complicated matter. It's where legal meets science. And you can imagine when a lawyer and a scientist speak, the resulting language is very obscure and obtuse. You don't want to be too precise, yet you need to be describing and laying open what you're inventing. Because ultimately, the patent system is designed in a way that we, the public, get to understand how you're solving a problem. In exchange for that, we grant you exclusivity. And we, as the public, we benefit from understanding how you solve the problem because it inspires us, it inspires other innovators to solve the problems in similar yet different ways so we can pursue our own avenues. It's basically a flywheel that is created among innovators, and the patent system has been very successful as that. There are, to give you a size of or sense of dimension, there are about 15 million active patent families out there today. That number may be meaningless. Let me put it a bit into proportion. 10 years ago, there were only 8 million active families. So the number of patent families in the world has almost doubled. A big piece of that increase is coming out of China. China has been increasingly aggressive with filing and innovating in many, many areas. And we will put a spotlight on China in today's presentation as well. While about only 1 million new patents were published about 10 years ago, just last year the rate was already exceeding well over 2 million new patents. So the overall rate of innovation is also continuously increasing across the globe as R&D expenditures are continued to climb. There is also more value in patents than just the technological information that is hidden inside it. A study by Ocean Tomo conducted in 2015 shows that the value of intangible assets as a share of the market value of the S&P 500 companies is reaching 87%. And patents, alongside of other intellectual property, make a bulk share of that 87%. So patents, innovation, knowledge are fueling companies' net value. But why else should we look at patents, and why are they enabling us to trace knowledge flows and even predict knowledge flows? I give you an example of the Swiss watchmaker Swatch. What you see on the chart on the right-hand side is patents and companies that are citing the Swatch portfolio over time. And you can see by applying smart patent analytics that one company clearly stands out from the rest of the pack. That company is being Apple. Why would Apple build on the portfolio of a Swiss watchmaker? Well, guess what? They want to build an Apple Watch. And we see that in the patent data 7 to 8 years before the actual product was launched in the market. Now, the patent data didn't quite tell us, oh, Apple is building an Apple Watch. But there's very strong signals that Apple is building valuable technology, because that's what you're seeing in the red line. It's the value of Apple's technology directly building on classic watch technology. It's what's called in academia technological spillover, the adaptation of old technology in new spaces. So while the patents at that point in time don't necessarily tell us that, there's an increasing amount of evidence that Apple is after something in the watch space. And as time progresses, patents become more telling, patents become more directly related to what Apple is after, and we still have a lot of time to react to the potential changes that are coming and the disruptions that are coming. Now, many of you may think, well, the Apple Watch, it's a tiny business compared to the iPhone, and I agree. But the Apple Watch by itself would make it a Fortune 200 company. So the Apple Watch is a major success, and the Apple Watch today has reached the size of the business of the entire Swiss watch industry. So as you can see, patents are, by all means, not a backward-looking data point, right? They resemble what has been invented till today, but they allow us actually to look in the future by applying smart patent analytics, by applying AI and machine learning, all the tools that we have at hand and that we also give into the hands of our customers. So let me share with you practical examples of how innovation analytics based on patents have been used by regulators as well. Because of this aspect of the high value that sits in patents, we've seen the S&P 500 market value, and the forward-looking nature of patents, allowing us to predict future success and outcomes. For this, we're going to turn to the merger of Dow-DuPont, announced in December 2015, the largest chemical merger in history, that was heavily scrutinized by regulators around the globe. Because as you can imagine, if two such giants merge, there are areas where there are competition concerns and where there are innovation concerns. Matter of fact, the European Commission started an investigation specifically in the agrochemical space. Barrier to entry, the agrochemical R&D is very, very high. You need billions of dollars of upfront investments to just start innovating. That doesn't mean you have a product out there yet. That doesn't mean that you are successful at. So they heavily scrutinized the merger in the agrochemical space, and the merging companies wanted to argue based on R&D expenditures, patent quantity, applications filed from the 1990s, all patents related to crop protection, and the entire patent portfolios. The European Commission, however, said, we don't want to look at R&D expenditures. We want to look at patents as a means of an output. We want to look at patent quality rather than just patent counts, because guess what? With patents also, the famous Pareto principle applies, and it's even more condensed. Research frequently shows that the value of a company's patent portfolio lies within about 5 to 10% of its assets. It's not even 80-20. It really comes down to 5 to 10%. They also wanted to look at all the active families, not all the published applications, that some of which were dead. They wanted to look at the active ones, because only the active ones are the ones that I, as as a company, can enforce to ensure my exclusivity. If a patent expires, or I let it expire, I drop it, there is nothing more that I can enforce. The European Commission also limited to crop protection in the European Economic Area, because that's the area of influence. And they only looked at the top 10% of patents for the fact that I shared before. As you can see from this analysis that we did back in 2015, 2016 timeframe, the merging companies indeed would have a massive position in the chemical space. Here, depicting also BASF and a merger that soon followed by Bayer and Monsanto. The reason why the European Commission turned to patents is because the European Commission understands that patents are a forward-looking measure. Traditionally, decisions were relied upon market shares and maybe upcoming product releases, upcoming product pipelines. With patents, it allows regulators to look 5, 10 years into the future. And they understood that the strongest patents in the company's portfolio were actually protecting the blockbuster products of the Dow-DuPont merging companies in the crop science area. So they could correlate product revenue with the value established by the patent indicators that we provided. And this is a picture this is an actual analysis piece from the merger investigation. It's all public material. It's a 900-page document. It's a good nighttime read, or flight over from Germany to Korea. And you can see that Dow-DuPont in the crop science area would have had a dominating market share, technology share in that sense, because what we're seeing here is the share of patent asset index of the most valuable patents that they would hold. And the European Commission said, with that, you will be stifling innovation for 5 to 10 years to come. You cannot merge like this. You need to divest, and ultimately had to divest about $1.2 billion worth of the merging company's assets in the crop science space. All evidence-based on publicly available data, patents. Let me give you another example of how IP-related decisions can impact current and future competitive positions and opportunities. I'm turning to this for a case study done by one of our researchers, where we looked at lithium-ion secondary battery technology over time. And what you can see in the chart on the left is the number of filings per year in some key jurisdictions for this technology over time. And you can see it's very small on the left, but you can see that Japan, in the early days of this technology, was actually the leading innovating nation. Japan eventually even won a Nobel Prize on lithium-ion batteries, I think 3 or 4 years ago, for a researcher from Asahi Kasei. But that advantage vanished over time because Japanese companies failed to properly manage and disseminate their knowledge and their IP. And you can see that today's powerhouse in the area, China, took over the space, not only in the overall share, but also they were heavily driving volume in the space. You can see by the width of the column in each year, the volume of filings. There are measures in place that we have developed and have proposed to companies how to more actively engage and mitigate such potential risks of knowledge flow and diffusion. We call it the dynamic IP modularity application matrix, where we can look at the importance of IP, but we can also look at the time component. And it is truly dynamic. IP is not static. The value of my assets today is different from the same value in 2 years, in 5 years, in 8 years. Think of the recent rise of generative AI, or think of the global pandemic and the technological advancements that were made during the pandemic in the pharma space. This completely shifts overnight the value of my IP and changes what I can do to do with it by either releasing IP in order to foster and attract others to invest in the same space as I'm giving space away, or by expanding my assets, exploiting my assets. Now, while these are interesting cases, I also want to take the opportunity today to look at the grand global challenges. Technological interdependency I touched upon already. That's what we're going to look at in the first piece. But then we're also going to turn to sustainability as undoubtedly the largest global challenge that we're facing. So let's look at technological dependencies first. I'm going to share with you now 4 analyses of how patents invented in different countries have been spread across the globe. First up, we're looking at the example of Japan. So we're looking now at all the patents invented by Japanese inventors and where these patents were subsequently also applied for. So they originated in Japan and they also went to other jurisdictions. First of all, you can see that Japanese inventors or patents invented by Japanese inventors are not 100% filed in Japan and maintained active in Japan. It's been leveling out at around 80%. Okay? But then, almost at the same level, Japanese inventions are also being protected in the United States. That is a pattern that you will see for the following countries as well. Unsurprisingly, because the United States are by far the largest single market in the world, and are as such also of very high importance for IP filings. Another development that you see is the rise of the gray line, China. So Japanese companies, Japanese inventors increasingly have filed also their IP in China for the very same, well, I would think for 2 reasons really. One, a large consumer market, but B, also to deter aggressive Chinese competitors. As we had seen before in the example with lithium-ion batteries, it's probably something that the Japanese companies had lacked in the past and had left room for China. So we clearly see a change in behavior here over the past 10 years. Other countries here in this example are less noteworthy, rather flat developments overall. Turning to the example of Germany, we see a very similar line for the home country, in this case in yellow. So German-based inventors, their patents mainly being filed in Germany at a rate about 80%. These German inventors could also belong to a US company, to a Japanese, to a Korean company. Right? Samsung has R&D facilities in Germany. They would also count into here as invented by an inventor in Germany. And then again, very same pattern for China. So German-based inventions increasingly go into China. We see higher levels overall for other European countries like the UK, France, and Italy, and a declining share for Japan. Now China, very different trend. So you see that in the early years, in the early 2000s, only about 50% of patents invented by Chinese inventors were actually also protected in China. That has increased to almost 100% today. Now, that has to do with a massive shift in volume and velocity with which Chinese companies are filing. Only about 0.1% of all patents worldwide in the year 2000 were invented by Chinese inventors. Today, that share is over 50% of all patents worldwide. There's about 8 million active patents out of the 15 million that I mentioned before that are actually invented in China. So, and are then also increasingly only protected in China. That being said, the sharp decline in the US, right, for Chinese patents also going into the US, so knowledge flowing into the US as the knowledge becomes available there in the form of the Chinese patents being filed in English, etc., has dropped to about 20%. In absolute numbers, however, that number is higher than ever before, right? So yes, the share of Chinese patents going to the US is down. The absolute number is way above what it's ever been. So that is something we need to keep in mind when we're looking at China. China is clearly an outlier when it comes to the history of patent filings over the last 50 decades. And then, last but not least, we have the picture for the United States. The United States, almost 100% of patents invented in the United States are also being filed in the United States. And then we see China also increasing, but not at the rapid pace that we've seen with other countries. And overall, other countries are trailing at a lower level, with Germany being number 2 in importance and UK number 3 in importance. And keep all of this in mind in respect to knowledge, cross-border knowledge flow, right? The invention coming here out of South Korea, being filed in Germany in German language, is now more easily accessible to innovators in Germany to understand and to try to follow or try to circumvent even. So that's part 1 of the country analyses. There's another part of country analyses. And for this, we will look at a comparison between the year 2000 and the year 2020 in a second. And you need to bear with me for a second. I'll explain to you what we're seeing on the screen. So on the left-hand side, we see where patents have originated from. So similar to what we saw in the charts earlier, this is, let's take the US. For patents originating from the US, 4% of their overall patent strength cite patents that are originating from Korea. You can interpret that as US dependency on Korean inventions, or US fellowship on Korean invention is only around 4%. When you look at Korea itself in the year 2000, it's 30%. It's unsurprisingly, as I, as Samsung, file for a new invention, it's unlikely that I do a bike today and a moon rocket tomorrow. Well, Samsung is very diversified, so it could actually happen. But typically, I file for a bike, and then I improve the bike, and I improve the bike even further. It gets electric, and so on. So I continue to build on myself. And we see that even on a nation-state level. To give another example, China's dependency in the year 2000 here is at around 12%. On the flip side, Korea's dependency on other nations in the year 2000 is, for example, 30% for Germany and 30% for the United States. We'll flash forward 20 years, and pictures have changed. US dependency on Korea is now at 39%, or has increased by 35 percentage points. So 2 observations here, and you can see many other numbers have increased. And I'll flip forward one more slide that just looks at the differences of shares. 2 observations. Globalization and technological interdependency has increased, right? Whereas we saw very low shares for some countries in the early years, nowadays double-digit numbers in terms of technological interdependency are absolutely normal. The other observation is that specifically China and Korea have further and further solidified their position as innovators. Other countries are nowadays more and more dependent specifically on these 2 countries. Turning the focus now on China and exemplifying that even further, we have contributed in 2022 to the 30-year TRIPS agreement anniversary of the World Trade Organization. It was, the book is titled Trade in Knowledge, which fits very well to today's topic of the presentation. And what we're seeing here in this analysis, on the left-hand side, is the Chinese dependency on other authorities in the year 2000, and the authorities being shown here on the x-axis. I'll give you a reading example. Chinese dependency on the US in the year 2000 was at about 90%. So 90% of the technology strength coming out of China was directly dependent on innovation made in the US in the first place. And we're proving or we're being able to trace that link through citations. On the right-hand side, you're seeing the dependency of other authorities on China in the year 2000. Here you see that 4%, again, that we've seen before for Korea. You see that China, this bar is actually the same as this bar. So China is dependent on itself, of course, but to a very small degree. What does that tell us? Well, China is obviously a comparably small degree, here as you can see. China's actually not as much innovating on innovation that comes out of its own country, but it's more innovating based on innovations coming out of third-party countries. And it's something that is in line with public reception, right? The Chinese had been following more industrialized companies in the early countries in the early 2000s and has been less of an innovator. So as we fast forward 20 years and we layer in the dependency today, now in red, the picture has dramatically changed. Let me first explain the left-hand side. China has grown from very little dependence on itself or ability to innovate on its own innovation to being self-sufficient. They're driving their own innovation agenda. They're not as dependent on third parties anymore. And you can see third-party dependence has even sharply declined. The red bars are, with the exception of Japan, all smaller than the black bars. On the right-hand side, that's the dependency of other countries on China. And that has massively increased in 20 years. Matter of fact, when we did this analysis for the World Trade Organization, we looked at data from 2015. We could already see that shift in 2015. We can already see that shift in 2012, 2010. It just starts to increase. Dependency of other nations on China has continuously increased, while the dependency and the self-sufficiency of China dependency on others has decreased, and self-sufficiency of China, the ability to innovate themselves, has continuously increased. And with that, I would like to turn to sustainable innovation. A recent study published by magazine Nature, has shown that in the first year of the pandemic, when all the cargo vessels around the globe, all the airplanes and all the cars came to a stop, greenhouse gas emissions were only reduced by 6.4%. We need to reach net zero till 2050. So that study clearly shows that we cannot rely on human behavior change at all. We need to find other ways of achieving our global agenda. And innovation is certainly one of the key areas that we believe will bring us to a more sustainable future. The United Nations have set out the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 with a clear roadmap to achieve the goals, to providing a sustainable environment and a planet worth living on for humanity, but also animals, plants, and all the ecosystems that we're housing. The goals of the United Nations are not just some lofty goals. No, there's actually clear targets behind with clear roadmaps on how to achieve these targets. And they even go down and explain which technologies that they are seeing as being key to achieve the goals. So what we did, being in innovation analytics and being inspired by technology, we went into the description of the United Nations SDGs and we extracted the technologies that are being mentioned and mapped them back to the world of patents. And that allows us to track and understand sustainable innovation. We can understand which technologies are being invested in, where patents are being filed, who are the world's strongest sustainability innovators, and where we have areas for improvement. And we bring that all together with the indicators that we have developed around patents and also with the database that we have developed that I've shown you many of the results from before. To not go too much in the details, but yet give you a sense of what that means of what we did is we literally went through tens of thousands of pages of documentation from the United Nations. We extracted on the indicator level all the technologies, all the targets that were mentioned. In this case here, in the example, you see waterborne diseases. And we turned that into search queries in the database, where we in very much detail explain how we have mapped and what to expect and what to not expect to find in the mapping. And that transparency is also key for adaptation and adoption, because the big mission that we have here with the mapping of the SDG goals to the patent data is to help global innovators make better decisions when it comes to sustainable innovation. And for that, we cannot provide a black box. We need to have a very transparent approach, and we can only be a translator of what the United Nations has done. We are not interpreting the data, we're just translating the information into the language of patents. That is, as I said in the beginning, so obtuse and obscure by design. So the data is all readily accessible in a database, and we're partnering also with many global organizations to make the data more and more accessible and easily understandable beyond also our customer base. But let me use some exciting customer examples of how this data is already being brought to life and how it helps companies to communicate their progress in sustainable innovation. We bring with this to sustainable innovation a sense of measurability, transparency. We allow to value impact of patents and entire technologies. And ultimately, as I said it a few times already, it's the accessibility. Right now, that data is simply hidden in the United Nations descriptions and in the world's patent databases at the 100-some world patent offices, and we bring it all together in one single place. Let me turn with my first example to German-based Merck, a pharma and chemical company that is deeply ingrained in science as a force of good. Merck is on a mission to turn its entire operations and company sustainable. And the approach that Merck has taken is a very holistic approach. So they want to understand also how their innovation and how their patents are contributing to sustainability. But they faced a major challenge. How do you do that? How do you determine that? Classic ESG approaches don't capture that, and ESG approaches are typically rather limited, are difficult to compare and difficult to apply to patents. So Merck found, by partnering with us, a solution to overcome this, and they announced a partnership with us in their 2021 annual report. And the partnership allows the Merck CEO and the Merck board to not only understand how they're driving forward their sustainable innovation agenda, but they're also able to explain that to outside shareholders and stakeholders in a meaningful way and in a transparent and comparable way, because patents are a global measure, they're equal for any organization, and they're easy to compare. And they made their announcement true in this year's annual report, and for the first time as a KPI, they're sharing that close to 30% of their newly published patents are driving forward the United Nations sustainability agenda. You can translate that to their significant R&D of Merck going into the SDGs. And now the benchmark is set and is set to increase. The last example, and I'm being told by the organizers I need to wrap up quickly, is of German company Merck. They were faced with a competitor that was shouting from the rooftops, shouting to the market of how green and how sustainable they are. But as an engineering company, Siemens is very fact-based. And when they understood the possibility of patents and sustainable innovation analytics, they were able to show not only to their board internally, but also to their shareholders how the competitor's share in sustainable relevant technologies has actually been flat for over 10 years, and Siemens' share has continued to increase. Siemens, as a matter of fact, belongs to the global top 100 sustainability innovators, as we've shown in a recent ranking. And last but not least, Siemens has released their sustainability report end of last year, establishing an SDG KPI around their portfolio based on the mapping available through our database. I have 3 key takeaways here for you today. One, I hope I was able to show you how data-driven insights in technological transformation are able to spur innovation and can help gaining competitive advantage. That can happen on a company level, but then that can also happen on a country level. Patents are truly forward-looking measures, allowing us to trace and predict knowledge flows and future technology trends. And last but not least, innovation is a response to overcome global challenges like technological dependencies and sustainable innovation. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the tour into the world of patents that I continue to find very fascinating. And thank you for listening. Thank you.